just out of curiosity, I'm going to make this a little bit interactive at the start. Hands up who has a car. Does anybody have a car or motorcycle? Okay, great. Hands up who understands the frustration when something breaks, okay, and you don't know where the problem is. Okay. This is a core frustration that motivates me in my career. I hate not knowing where a problem is, and I will use all the hours in the day to find out where it is. Okay, so I'm going to open up with this. My mission today is to motivate and inspire all of you here to solve problems at scale. And I'll talk about my background now in a second. But this here was an idea because I heard about a client in trouble. And that idea turned into a business case. The business case went extremely well, and it turned into a product, which is now global. And it's now a core part of the company that I work for. So, but the major thing here is it's not a giant, it's not an elephant. This is something that can be achieved by everyone in this room, sometimes maybe not on your own, but you will leverage other people to actually make this possible. So let's just talk a little bit about me and give you some context. I am a Land Rover enthusiast, so I drive 60-year-old plus Land Rovers all over the globe. I usually pull them out of ditches as a very bad photo. In this condition, this particular one here, I'm going to drive to Morocco in April, and I'm going to compete in the Santana Trophy, which means I'm going to drive across the desert for 3 weeks, and I will get there quicker than everyone else. Well, that's my mission anyway. It'll break down, I'll rebuild it, and ultimately, if I have to push it, I will get to the end of that event. Big part of who I am, and I believe it's very important, like with every product and even look at every builder, context, a bit of story is always really important. Okay, so a bit of background on me. To be very quick, I was told that, you know, Irish people, we talk a lot and we talk about ourselves a lot, so to be really quick about this. So my background, I spent 6 years at LinkedIn. I finished up being one of the youngest leaders in the data science part of LinkedIn. So I was heading up sales intelligence for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and I sat as the global head of customer success analytics at 24. Was very lucky, and I built the right thing at the right place for the right person at the right time. And I may bring it up just in terms of how simple it is to do these things if you have the right business stakeholder behind you. Now the thing about LinkedIn, when you are, so I moved to a very, very small data company, which I love to bits. But when you come from somewhere like LinkedIn, you ultimately, you are spoiled. Top 5 richest data sources in the world. It's like being an adventurer. It really is, because you're essentially told, oh, you've identified this problem. Well, you know, why don't you go to that place? Why don't you explore and come back and tell us what happened? And that's what it was like at LinkedIn. Then I joined Talivest, which had 5 employees. Now has 30, so we're getting there. But the thing about Talivest was they had no data. And I was a data scientist that came from LinkedIn. I was like a spoiled child. But the thing was, you know, we got customers, and, you know, they part of what Talivest do, they sell surveys, and, you know, they build communities and all that kind of stuff. So data grew over time. But ultimately, uncharted territory for someone like me, couldn't pass certain boundaries and not enough data to really get conclusions at the very beginning. A little bit frustrating. So I'm just going to talk about Talivest just for a second, and I'm going to move on to the really cool stuff. And by the way, I'm all about images, because when I'm sitting there looking at lots of text, I'm either going to prioritize looking at the slides and taking photos and never looking at those photos again, or I'll listen to the presenter. So I'm going to go with just the images, and we'll see how it goes. So I joined Talivest because they had this mission. So LinkedIn's mission is incredible. Provide economic opportunity for every employee in the global workforce. Who doesn't want to be part of that? It's amazing, right? But Talivest, they reached out to me through LinkedIn. Ironic. And they basically gave me this idea, which was, imagine being able to impact or be able to create a best culture fit for your top talent, right? For every company, you know, like, so that they don't lose their best people, or at least can keep them for as long as they can in their journey, right? And I thought that was cool. And then I met the COO who was like, yeah, man, it's really, we want to make, jobs suck less, and she's really cool. So my CEO, who I report into, Laura, she's releasing her first album. She's a solo artist. She is incredible. And I am very lucky to have her in my life. But she just pushes me past any extreme, very creative. And ultimately, it's a female-led company, so 2 founders, both females. Jane is in the top under 30s, very innovative, just always gets the best ideas. She surrounds herself with the most incredible people and manages to come out with something that is, well, you can put an action towards it and ultimately, well, make an impact. And Laura, then, the other side of things, which I just mentioned. Just 2 incredible women, and I've been with them 2 years, and I'm going to be with them for a long time more. No opportunity is going to distract me from what they put in front of me. Okay, I'm going to talk about the product, this initiative. Now, this is a bit weird because it says Meet Amy, so I'm going to explain that. Every model that I do, I spend days, hours, nights, weekends with this idea that, this model is going to drive a business impact. So I spend a lot of time, and usually I'm in that process. There's somebody in my life annoying me or chasing me or whatever it is. Amy at the time was an individual that basically expressed that I needed a haircut, my beard needed to be trimmed, I needed to change a puncture in my Land Rover. Basically anything that was a problem, Amy highlighted. But in the end, I became a better person, better hygiene, whatever it was. So the thing is, Amy is this model because ultimately this model is pushing companies to create a better culture fit for their talent and ultimately reduce their turnover, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about this at high level, just show you, because I don't really want to go through a product. I want to just show you how cool it is and just how easy it is to understand. And then we'll go through the step-by-step process of how all of you here can actually do it yourselves, okay? And it can be as technical as you want. And by the way, we'll probably run out of time because I talk a lot. So this is a networking event. My name is Luke. I'm quite large. You'll see me from wherever you are. So just stop me, introduce yourself, talk to me. I'm happy to talk about this in any detail you want. I even brought my laptop so we can really go into detail if you like. So I keep pressing the wrong button. So let's talk about this for a second, right? This dash, ultimately, if you look at the mind of a HR decision maker, it needs to be a little bit versatile because every company has different metrics that they prioritize and follow. So here, as an example, it's looking at NPS across the employee life cycle, okay? So as you can see, pre-hire, onboarding, stay, so current employees, and then across exit. It's just a lot of companies do prioritize this metric, so we allowed that in this particular dashboard. But where it gets really interesting, okay, is, so let me give you some context. My very first slide, I talk about how an initiative, okay, an idea, resulted in a product that reduced in turnover in a call center, a very aggressive, high-churning company, by 30% within 6 months. Okay, so how did I achieve that? Ultimately, it's all about bringing, and I'll go through it in detail, but ultimately creating a risk score for every employee based off different data points, different roadblocks, different things that impact them and their journey within that company. And we're able to create a risk profile. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, these probabilities, they can be inaccurate. I can tell you right now that this one is 70%, what's 67% accurate now across all of our customers, which is quite a lot. But, some people will still get, what about dollar impact? I've heard that today. I built the same model for a very big data company, which I can't exactly name, but it's very obvious. And ultimately, it was around churn with customers, sales intelligence. And so it identified what customers were at risk, and it recommended to the sales rep what actions to take and what content. So I designed content. So what content to share to basically get them to re-engage with the product, okay? It's very, very similar. And the thing is, I'm mad about calculating impact. So in that particular case, with sales intelligence, I made sure that a sales rep could not use my product unless they claimed or basically logged that the account was dead, was no longer going to grow with us. And so then they got the support. So you could actually track, without us, you wouldn't have X. Within 12 months, it brought $8 million of additional bookings into the company. It was a big deal, and it's still there today. This is no different. People are no different. We can collect data. It is all about removing the silo effect and collecting the right data, which we'll go through, but you can create a risk profile. And right here, what you're seeing if you were of this particular company is that 200 people are at high risk of leaving in the next 6 months. It gives a dollar value, and this is based off internal and external research. So for example, it calculates the cost of onboarding, the fact that it takes roughly about 10 months, depending on the industry, for an employee to become or to create, a reasonable or average output. It takes all these calculations into consideration, the cost, the risk of a bad hire, all of these data points which I can talk about. So it's really important. It highlights there is a problem, okay? There is a cost to it. It also gives you context at the bottom so you can see across your employees, like what is the average tenure. So as you can see, people are actually staying 1 to 3 years, so not exactly bad considering we're in the age of the millennial. This is where it gets interesting though. So we've just said that 200 people are at risk of leaving. There's $1+ million at risk in terms of investment. So the next thing is we identify what those risk factors are. So like what exactly, we talked about the frustration when you have a car or motorcycle, whatever it is, and you keep going back to the mechanic and you keep saying, the problem is still there, and they say, well, we'll try this and see what happens. This is the same thing, except it works. So it highlights what problems are like actually causing the risk factor. So it could be down to management. It could be down to within management. It could be management with personal time off, or it could be management with communication. It highlights the top reasons using principal component analysis with the machine learning to highlight what exactly is causing the problem. But you're going to say there, it's probably still vague. I'm getting a factor. I already knew it was a management problem. I already knew it could have been communication. Well, we'll go a step further. So it actually highlights, when you click into it, so by the way, to take a step back, and sorry if I'm speaking a little bit quick, but this is very exciting. So if we take a step back for a second, all these surveys within our product, right, we go for anonymous. And the reason we go anonymous is really important when you look at the likes of exit surveys. So a global study was done, you can Google it. If you move, I don't know what the size of the sample was, but it was pretty extreme. If you move people from a in-house person-to-person exit survey, right, to an anonymous exit survey, 40% of the answers change. Now, how insane is that? Like 40% of the answers change. So that means all the direction you're taking, it means diddly squat, as we say. And you're basically going in the wrong direction, right? So that's one benefit of the anonymous piece. So right now, some of you are going to say, what about GDPR? Like, there are no identities at risk here. If it goes below a certain number, we do not, exploit any identities. So like, no identity is at risk here. But going back to if there is a management issue with PTO, personal time off, or management communication, it actually goes into the text. It actually identifies, using sentiment analysis in that context, what were the problems with those managers? What exactly were they doing? So you can read into that. You can completely understand and take an action. But then you're going to say, yeah, but we have a big company. There's 10,000 employees, so in this particular case, you're giving us a decent direction, but overall, there's a big world to explore. So I'll come back to you with this, with the filters. So what we do is, there are a number of initiatives out there that HR departments take. So it could be, for example, a referral scheme. There's loads of different types that you guys go through. You can filter by that. But not only that, demographics is really important. So seniority, experience level, function. So are they in IT? Are they in engineering? The department breakdown within the company. We take all this information in. So literally, when you open this dashboard, it's highlighted to you that there are people at risk of leaving. It's going to cost you a significant amount of money, and you can narrow down exactly where those pain points are, where this is going to happen. And I've already just said that at this moment in time, if we go back on previous employees, and if we just look at this has been rolled out over the last 6 months. We're actually doing it for free just because we're really excited. I'm pushing this. It's really exciting. But ultimately, it's 67% accurate. And for a small company like us, it's a dream come true if you manage to get a model that's over 60% accurate in a big data company like it is, because there are so many discrepancies, discontinued products, loads of different things. It's always hard to have a really strong, mature data set. But here, 67%, we're really, really happy. It will go over time because we'll change data points and everything else. But this is really exciting because you can narrow down where the pain point is And then you're in a position, because for anyone that's in HR here in operations, I know lots of them. Somebody came to me today, I can't see her. But ultimately, you guys know what to do once you have the problem put in front of you. And there are consultants out there. My mission is to basically highlight where the problem is so that you can make an action to solve it as soon as possible. And this is both for your culture and also for the money standpoint, but also so you can retain top talent and do your mission properly. So let's just go back again. It's not just about me. It's not just about Talivest. It's not just about my company, but it's people analytics. People analytics, a very simple method. I'm a simple man. It reduced turnover within 6 months by 30%. So I'm going to talk to you. Yeah, we got time. We got 12 minutes. I'm going to talk to you a step-by-step approach, lots of images on how to achieve that yourselves, right? So I know this is really overused, the iceberg analogy, but I'm going to use it again. We really are at the tip of the iceberg. At this moment in time, I'm using random forests. The reason it's my preferred method is we don't have enough data and we have too many variables. I don't want to cut down the variables because I want to get a holistic view exactly when something does happen to jump in, when it causes a problem, and how it adjusts my risk factor. It's probably a lot of you there, any data scientists, you probably say that's very safe and concealed of you to do so, but I believe in taking intelligent risks, and right now I just don't think I want to explore outside of random forest just for now. So it really is at the tip of the iceberg. I know there's a lot of other deadly methods out there, but that's what I'm sticking to for now until we get a little bit bigger. So let's talk about the how. 30%. 30% is a big number. Imagine reducing that within your company, reducing top talent turnover by 30%. How? So let's do it step by step. Work the floor. This is really important because ultimately I know so many incredible, talented data scientists out there, and I mean way more educated than I am, and ultimately just way better in every way. But the thing is, whenever an initiative is thrown at them, the first thing they do is they want to know where the data is. And then they want to mine it, and then they want to play with it, and then they want to look at correlations, and then they want to map it to outcomes. And then they come back to their stakeholder with, sometimes it can be very accurate, but ultimately, data can be biased. And we just said, even in a big data company, accuracies can vary. Working with the floor gives you an advantage because you can, so if it's an internal initiative you're going to do, if you work with your HR business partners, you're going to understand bias very quickly. What are the problems that actually aren't recorded? Because there are a lot of problems out there that aren't in surveys yet. Because for example, I know surveys, and a lot of companies, they're very stubborn about the questions they ask, but a lot of them don't ask about working from home because they don't want to. They're afraid to ask that question. But yeah, it's a big factor. Working from the floor, if it's your HR business partner, or else if you're selling this and you work with the customer success manager, you're going to get that insight you need to ultimately build out your model and sometimes set out a bias or even adjust your weightings. Working the floor, really important. Start with that. Next thing, silos. So I've started doing a lot of consulting lately. What you find is you get into a room, they pull out all these amazing Tableau dashboards, and it's incredible, it looks great, and you're like, why am I here? And then they say that nothing has really made an impact, it's just the same thing. The metric never really changes. And it turns out that, I was only speaking with a company last week about this, and I got grilled on it. One individual employee could be subject to taking I think it was maximum 5 engagement surveys within that year, okay, which is insane. And the thing is, those 5 engagement surveys belong to 5 different departments, which is just mad because each department thinks when they map that employee to an outcome, let's say they're looking at did they leave within the last 6 months, they think that one of their variables from their survey was the reason, or else a combined reason. Eliminate the silos, get everything together. The way my model works is I have each individual employee, every single point along their life cycle, and then I map it to the outcome. When did they leave? Because we're focusing on turnover right now. Really important. Now let's talk about design. So I kind of touched on this a little bit with design, the questions. So my recommendation from kind of doing this from the bottom up and working with a startup with great people, the one thing that we've recently started to bring in is behavioral work therapists, or workforce behavioral therapists. There we go. These guys are incredible because the thing is, they understand the gig economy. They understand that it is the age of the millennial, and essentially, they have a structure in place. Like, I've just seen so many engagement surveys. They ask the same things over and over again, and they're not getting it. The answers are not getting a little bit different. Sometimes you'll get a massive surge, but ultimately, if you're not adjusting this piece, this foundation, you're not going to get new information. So if you haven't already, get one of these therapists in and have a chat with them, because even just that open conversation, if you don't buy anything off them, what you will find is that there is something that you're not doing. You probably already had it in your head, and they'll basically put it to your mouth so that you can make an action, okay? Really, really important. I've spoke about the random forests. So just to kind of talk about, there's within this family, within this model, okay? I've explained already, because I've so many variables and I'm going to say a quite immature data set. Random forest, approaching that was the most versatile way that I could do it. It worked really well with LinkedIn. I tried linear regression, but didn't really work. Data set was not mature enough, and unfortunately, discontinued products and the fact that we're constantly growing and moving into new areas, linear regression was just pointing us in the wrong direction. And from working in the floor, I knew that straight away. You know, the customer success manager was telling me so, and even within Talivest, the same sort of thing. Now, the thing is, when you're building a random forest model, and even if you're just a data rookie, ultimately, really think about the outcome that you're trying to understand. So with this particular model, like, we have a question, which is, how long were you at that company for? You know, so there are thresholds, you know, 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, right the way up to 3+ years. But what if we're stepping back for a second and we're actually thinking about, like, right now, I had this conversation with a really, really close friend of mine. I actually missed my flight yesterday because of this conversation. So I'm speaking right now about, you know, predicting employee turnover. But I've recently got interested in the effects of onboarding and just how does that affect feeling over time. So I've introduced questions in the engagement survey all about feeling. I got a workforce therapist to get involved here so that I can map all the variables from their onboarding right up until they have a pulse survey every 3 months, just to see how that affects their feelings over time. I'm interested. We had a heated discussion about it. We missed our flight from Helsinki to here, and we didn't get here till like 11 o'clock last night. It was a very passionate discussion, but ultimately, it's something. But what I'm trying to get to, the point I'm trying to get without having any words on my slides except random forest, is beware of the outcome. Really focus on that, because that's really going to give you the direction that you're going to try to achieve. This is a sandcastle. Okay, so what this slide is trying to represent is, in my model, I used all of the exit survey data for this particular company. So remember, this was one business case where I wanted to prove that I could have an impact, that I could show data to these people to drive them to actually care, make an action, and reduce their turnover, okay? Why is this slide relevant? So what I did was I pulled all of the exit data. Now, in most companies, the exit survey and the pulse survey, the difference between them in the questions is that one is in the past tense, one is in the present tense, in most cases. And I'd strongly recommend you have a similar structure, because it's really helpful in this particular case. So what I did was I built my model around the exit survey. And as you know, when somebody leaves, now I do not have statistics and I'm not going to make any up. When somebody leaves a company, they're usually one of three. They're either happy to leave, but, you know, at the same time, they're going to miss things. So they have a heightened emotion about what was really good and what wasn't so bad, right? If somebody was dismissed and they weren't happy about it, they're obviously going to over-exaggerate things. And then you've got the neutral. But ultimately, when you build a random forest, right, around the exit data, what you see, because of this kind of carry on, is that it has over-exaggerated values for, like, the key factors that resulted in their premature leaves. Now, why is that interesting and why is that important? Because when you sleeve that data, so I'm using the bucket as the analogy for sleeving, when you sleeve that data over the pulse, the current engagement data, the sand in this particular example, what you find is that because those factors that cause premature leave are over-exaggerated ever so slightly, it gives you a better chance of identifying these factors that are causing the problems early on in the stage, okay? This is what we've seen. I know it doesn't sound very scientific, but it's working really, really well. And I said, this was one business case. As you know, you must have a successful business case in any company to really drive an initiative where you need resources. And I guess this particular slide here, it's all about when you have all of that, when you have that data, when you sleeve the exit data over the pulse, what do you have? Well, you're able to highlight individuals in pain that literally are providing value to your company that need help. And that's it. And that was the mission. The mission was, I took over this account from my junior account analyst, and I said, listen, I'm going to take care of this customer now. And I did all the reports and just wanted to understand how they dealt with that data, the standard data you give on summaries and NPSs, just with the engagement data they were getting from their surveys. And then I started to produce this. And I sent an email highlighting who's at risk, the department breakdowns, the cost. And they invited me down to their office to speak to their CHRO. And basically I was able to highlight this, and they started making actions almost immediately. Like, this is not theory, this is practical, this happened. And ultimately, within 6 months, we saw it's more than that now. I think it's like 40%, but at the time that this deck is around, it was 30%. A 30% reduce in their turnover over time, much better engagement as well, even though, like, possibly if it was to build a model just solely on engagement, I'd probably use different output values instead of just looking at their tenure over time. And ultimately, as I've said before, and I'm really proud of it, and it's not to scare anyone, but ultimately it's accurate. Now, as I said, accuracy, it's like any of those laws of diminishing marginal returns. Over time, things happen, things change, it will fall, it will rise. But it's my mission to make sure it is as successful as possible. And as we spread it out, we're just doing the call center segment at the moment because it's a very aggressive employee turnover churn market, just the way it runs across EMEA. So that's all I'm doing at the moment, but I'm going to take up the courage and take an intelligent risk to start rolling this across bigger tech companies, for the likes of millennials and Theory Y workers. But the thing is, it's accurate, and it was built in my spare time. It was built I'm not a very well-educated data scientist. I don't have any masters or MBAs. This was done just purely on intuition and research, and actually pulling people in, leveraging the right people that are far smarter than me to reach a collective goal. And I guess I want to finish off here, which is there's a lot of things going on. Like I've just spoke about, the exit model, identifying people at risk. Now I'm looking at, I missed a flight because I spoke about the onboarding model and just how that impacts someone's feelings of being included. Like, we're talking about diversity and inclusion now, and how that's a major impact on how people feel and what their output is like over time. There's a lot of products like that coming out there. I'm really excited now, just like this turnover piece, branching that out, pushing it out, and seeing how it impacts other businesses. But like the onboarding piece, that's exciting for me because it's like that first piece of impact. We talk about impact. Everyone's mentioned that word a million times today. That first point, that touch point or impact point where you interact with an employee, like, does it actually affect their feeling over time? I'm really interested to see what a model does, and ultimately how I can guide an active or an informed decision within the HR industry. And that's basically me. I think I'm just kind of on time. Does anybody have any questions? Like, and I said, I don't mind being grilled, but ultimately, any sort of detailed stuff, I did bring my laptop. I'm going to be here till very late, and yeah, what do you think?